What did you say?
I said, I hope you all have a great week.
What?
Have a great week. Like, like great days. Do the days. Have great days.
Everybody.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 8 of the Magus Brothers podcast. I am Tyler, and with me always is the lovely...
Oh, hey, y'all. I'm Feyerbrand, and thank you guys for joining us for episode 8. It is 8. I don't really have anything to say about 8. I'm indifferent to the number.
It's a great Final Fantasy that came right after 7.
Oh, yeah. No, there we go. That's great. Oh, my God. How did I miss that? This is Final...
I don't know. I was staring you in the face.
Gosh, it was right over my head, dude. That is a great Final Fantasy that I can't wait to when we do talk about it, because I know we both have a lot of things to say about that game.
Yeah, I feel like after we finish talking about Final Fantasy VII here in the next month, it'll be like, okay, what are we going to move to? And it's just going to be us, I don't want to say fighting, but like debating over where we transition to.
Yeah, I think 8's actually, honestly, a good one, because that one is very love-hate. And
yeah, I was thinking 8 or 10, but I'm down. I love them both. We can do both.
Well, I just feel like 8 is sort of love or hate, just like the ending of the 7 remake.
Oh my God. Great planning in the podcast and great pivot. Great. Before we dive...
Zero planning.
I love us. Before we dive into the ending of Remake and close out this 3-part discussion of the game, couple of things. One, we have a Discord server. So link is in the channel description. We will post it on Twitter when the episode releases, and share it occasionally so people can come join and talk with us. And then one remaining housekeeping item is I made a comment on our last episode about listener Mary, who played the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I made a comment that she had played the game on easy mode, and I used it to kind of essentially make the point that the combat was in the remake built in such a way that you could dive in and set it to easy. You could, play it on hard. You could min-max the absolute crap out of it and do speed runs. The combat was for everybody, and it had layers. However, Mary initially started it on easy, but then swapped to normal. And I don't want to misrepresent anybody, so I am just throwing that correction in there for all of our listeners and for Mary.
Gosh, you monster.
I know, I'm a horrible person.
Oh, how do you sleep at night?
Pretty well, actually, for the most part. I just one sheet. I don't like a comforter. It's too warm for me. And I have to have my feet uncovered. I have to taunt the bed monster to come out and try and get those toes.
That's not even taunting. That's like holding the steak in front of the dog's face. Like, come on, boy, come and get it.
Come and get him. But before we dive in, Fair, how are you doing? How's your week been?
My week is literally boring. Really, nothing exciting has happened at all. Really, I can't.
We've been playing Final Fantasy 14 together. I think that's pretty exciting.
So, like I said, it's been a pretty boring.
Oh, you monster! You literal.
So Friday and Saturday night, this last weekend, which I don't really know where that falls in time for when the listeners are going to be listening. But anyways,
it's actually still this past weekend, technically, if you listen to it when it releases.
We're recording this really late. Tyler and I, we played a bunch of Final Fantasy 14 on my YouTube channel live stream, and we did a bunch of mount farming, a bunch of Rathalos farming with my brother as well. And it was a pretty good time. We're both returners to the game, so we're trying to get back into the groove of how our jobs work. And I chose my 400.
Some of us are deciding on a job.
So I landed on Astrologen because I like that outer space theme, and I like playing Yu-Gi-Oh cards and stuff. I want to send people to the Shadow Realm. So it was pretty good, and I have to assume yours was good. I mean, you did play with me and seemed to enjoy it.
Yeah. Before I launch into what I'm feeling about it, I would like for the, whatever stenographers are out there to show on the record that on August 1st, when we recorded this at 7:08 p.m., Feyerbrand decided that Astrologen was his main. And I would like, what did I say? Astrologen, whatever.
I don't know.
Whatever.
I'm just so used to correcting people.
Yu-Gi-Oh card dealer healer. That is his main. And I would like Feyerbrand to snip this out for future use should he change his main, just so we can reference this back.
Oh, I'm going to delete this out of the final cut.
Anyway, no, it was great. We actually initially, for a little bit of background for our listeners, I was going to restart a brand new character to play alongside you while you did trophy runs, and I was going to re-experience the story, the music. You know, we'll dive into my experience with Final Fantasy 14 at a later date, but I basically wanted to re-experience the story, the music, all of those things. I'm still going to do that for myself, but Feyer came to the conclusion that he had a lot of time investment in his other character, and I think you decided ultimately to swap back to that character, which kind of like released us from the burden of needing to level these brand new characters and complete, you know, all the way up to Endwalker before it's released. So I jumped back to my main, who was always going to continue being my main, and you know, we did some Rathalos mount farming, et cetera, et cetera. It was great. I'm very excited to be back. It is kind of weird having been gone for so long and being back. Like, there's these weird, you know, flare-ups of nostalgia, revisiting these places, and then on top of that, wow, I just lost my train of thought. Also doing the new content, like not re-experiencing, but doing all the Shadowbringer patches because I had missed those. So kind of refreshing that story as I play through. It's been great. I'm having a lot of fun.
That's good because I skipped a lot of the story. So I expect shame bells. I want people to like follow me around with the bells like in Game of Thrones, shaking them at me. Shame, because I get so impatient sometimes that I can't be there mentally in the moment to experience the story, but I need to unlock content. So, but thankfully New Game Plus exists, and I will eventually go back and re-experience those one day.
I hope you do. This is great. Shifting away from that, we are here this episode to talk about the ending to the Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1.
Dun, dun, dun.
It was some of the biggest changes to occur in the game, and we felt that it deserved its own episode because, one, the changes were very big, and two,
massive.
The changes were in such a way that it really potentially alters the course of the entire game. I think it will. The devs have said since then that the game will continue very much in the same way that we expect it to. I don't see how and what that means. You know, dev talk is very vague, especially in a marketing sense, leading up to game releases. But the changes were substantial. They were massive. Really divided a lot of the fans. You know, we talk about, little things changed here and there. And, you know, people talk about door textures and, you know, whispers and this and that. And whispers play into the ending. But really, it's that ending that really stuck a lot of fans and even me initially. So we are here to talk about our feelings when we first saw that ending. If we can recapture that. Yeah, or lack thereof. And kind of recapture what we were feeling when we first saw it and played it. Then we're going to shift into theories, what we think is happening. We don't have big wrinkles in our brain, so
no, I'm a smooth brain two-head,
and so you know, we're not big theory crafters. You know, we're definitely not going to do some of the things that people like Schrodingersbabyseal, I should use the full name, and Sleepezi, people like that doing out there in the community. But you know, just kind of like our light theories about what's going on and what side of which camp we kind of fall under about what we think is going on. But for now, Feyer, tell me what you think or what you thought when you saw that ending, if you can kind of recapture that moment.
Okay. No, I can recapture it because it's still somehow very fresh in my memory because it was so impactful. So I remember I was playing this on stream. It had to have been like 3 or 4 in the morning. I had been playing for 8+ hours straight, which is a very long stream for me. I normally stream for 4 hours at a time or less. So I was very tired. So I remember powering through it when I got, you know, I was like chapter 16. I'm like, screw it. We're powering through it. So I powering through it just to get it to end because I didn't want to have to come back because I wasn't going to be able to stream for a few more days. And I remember being confused as heck, like absolutely none of it. If you would have asked me when this game was first announced what my wildest theory on how the ending of the game was going to be, no, it would have been absolutely nowhere near that. Nothing that happened in the ending of this game is anything that I could have even guessed in my wildest dreams. It was so far out there and different from anything that I could have ever expected that it blew my mind in a weird way because it was just confusing. Like, it leaves you on this really weird plot or this really weird cliffhanger. Like, all of the ending dialogue at the end of the roadway in chapter 18 is cryptic as heck. None of it really makes sense without the context of what anybody is talking about. And we still don't have any of that context. So it just left me confused. I'm pretty sure, like, I remember sitting there for a few minutes, just like in stunned silence as I was trying to process what I put together and trying to decide if it was because I was really tired or if this ending just didn't make any sense and none of it's explained and it was basically just rude. So I remember sitting there and like a bunch of the people in my stream had already beaten it prior to me. So they were all excited to see my reaction and they wanted to talk about it. And unfortunately, I couldn't even sit there and talk about it because I couldn't even process what I just witnessed or seen. So I was like, well, I said my goodbyes, about 10, 15 minutes after I beat the game and I went off to sleep. And I thought maybe sleeping on it would help me form my opinion on if I enjoyed the ending or not. And I can tell you right now, it didn't. I remember waking up the next day and thinking on this. I thought on this ending for like a year and a half, pretty much until Intergrade came out. I was trying to decide if I liked the ending or not. I guess my answer is I don't know if I liked the ending or not. That was my initial reaction. I was just like, I was neutral. I was true neutral when I first experienced it. And I feel like I still am. And I don't remember if it was that night after I got off stream that you and I were texting about the ending because I know you beat it before I did.
It was not. I distinctly remember being upset that I had to wait till next day to talk to you about it because I was like, this dude needs sleep, but I have to wait.
So remind me again how you felt.
So chapter 17, like when we talk about the ending, like we're really talking about the Sephiroth coming down on the highway scene, when he shows up and it's like, oh, crap. But really, chapter 17 and 18 are pretty like they're so connected and they felt like they went so fast that it's hard not to go back even a little bit further, because that's where like obviously the whispers and stuff like that were changes. But like in chapter 17, you get like the drum stuff going on with Hojo, and that wasn't there. And that felt like a pretty big addition to like leave the drum and get up to the tower or the top of the tower. It was basically like I felt like going into the ending, I was like, oh, wow, they are starting to really ramp up a lot of this new stuff, a lot of these changes that are kind of going on. Heidegger, which is kind of small, but Heidegger was up there with the Shinra grunts when you come down with the bike on Cloud. The bike on Cloud, with Cloud on the bike. The bike is riding Cloud through the tower.
That sounds like some awful Blender project that I want to see somebody make now.
Yeah, please. You get that. You fought the Valkyrie much earlier, so you really only get, I think it's called the Arsenal with Barrett and Tifa or Barrett and Aerith and Red down there, and you don't have the other elevator boss. So like I was just noticing all of these changes kind of going on, and I was just like, okay. We had the whole Barrett getting stabbed thing, and then brought back. You fought Genova in the president's chambers, and I was just like, this is wild. And I was like, and then we got to Sephiroth, and I wasn't surprised to see Sephiroth at that point because we'd already seen him so much. And in my head, intellectually, I knew that they can't recapture that whole Jaws thing with Sephiroth. Sephiroth has pervaded pop culture. We, like most people going to a Final Fantasy, know what Sephiroth is or who he is, at least in some aspects. So like they couldn't redo that, and they're not telling that same story. So it's like I wasn't upset that Sephiroth was there by any means. And like, I was like, okay, like we're playing essentially a whole Final Fantasy VII game. There's no way they were going to sit on Sephiroth this whole time and make everyone wait. What really got me was, and I was like, this is fine. But when I got to the Zack cutscenes and saw Zack initially, I was stoked. I was like, oh my God, we're getting to see Zack already, et cetera, et cetera. But then when Zack lived, I was angry. I remember playing it with my partner. She was sitting right there, watching all of the ending and stuff. And I remember being so upset because Zack, I don't want to say Zack was made to die, which is kind of heartless, but like Zack's death propels Cloud forward. Zack's death and all of that is integral to the story. And I was like, they're really just going to bring Zack back and like undermine all of this story that is going on with Cloud and what the heck? And I did not pick up on the whole bag of chips or whatever, the stamp on that bag being a different stamp. I was too emotionally wrapped up in the story. I was not processing things critically. So I thought Zach was alive in this timeline. I was just like, oh my God, like, what are they doing? Like, this is wild. And I talked with my partner about it for a while, and she made a lot of great compelling points that kind of calmed me down about like Zach being important. They couldn't just leave him as a footnote. He had to have a strong presence in the story, and they were setting that up. You know, similar ideas that you and I have talked about in the story, with them really needing to showcase all the characters from the compilation in these parts.
Right.
But I was super upset and did not like it at first. Did some reading, did some theories. Somebody pointed out pretty quickly the whole stamp bag thing, and I was like, oh, this is an alternate timeline thing. Presumably, we don't know. We don't know for sure. But there were people pointing out that like even Aerith as a kid from that room she was in within Shinra Tower, Stamp has always been a beagle in this timeline, quote unquote, that we're playing Remake in. So like it wouldn't make sense for them to have changed it. We don't really know. There's not been confirmation on any of this. So I don't want any listener to take what we are saying as fact. It's just based on the body of evidence. We're making educated assumptions. This idea of Zach being in an alternate timeline resonated. And I was like, okay, it's weird that they're doing timelines. I feel like, I feel like Infinity War or Endgame hadn't even been out that long. And like, I was just like, man, like alternate timelines is just like the hot button thing right now. I guess this is just what we're doing. But yeah, I was upset at first when it first hit. It took me a little bit of reading, hearing some theories, talking with my partner, talking with you. And I really came around because I felt like as I started to step back emotionally and look at all the pieces intellectually, I started to see the potential of what Square Enix was going for, them revisiting this story in a very meta way, which some people don't like. Some people don't want like a meta retelling. Again, we've talked a couple of times about this, but like them making these changes and altering the course of the story this way gave people so much to talk about. We wouldn't be talking about, we would talk about Remake if it was just a 1-for-1 remake, but it would be like, oh, those character interactions, these graphics, it is beautiful. But like, you can only talk about that in so many ways for so long. They're doing this game in parts. People are still speculating the ending and where it's going, especially after intermission gave us like a little bit more breadcrumbs. I love it. I love that they're taking the story in a different direction. I love the ending. It won me over. It took time. But yeah, I love that we can be here a year plus after the game is out, still talking and trying to figure out what the hell's going on.
So I want to clarify something based on what you said. So, I said I am neutral to the ending, but that does not mean that I am against the change, because as we've talked about, and as you just mentioned, I 100% am all here for changes to drive this discussion, to drive different theories, to do all of these things. I am for the change. I am just neutral because I don't know if the changes are going to be good or not come further parts.
That's the other thing is it's so hard. Like we're judging this game on an ending that is essentially a cliffhanger, and cliffhangers suck, and we don't know what's going to happen. Like we need to know what the payoff is going to be and to see the full story. So it's hard to assess just this part because, again, I think I mentioned in the last episode, like visually, there were things I missed about this ending where it looks like Sephiroth is being held prisoner by the Harbinger and he absorbs the whispers. That stuff, like I did not pick up on that playing it. It took other people's theory crafting for me to really pick up on that. And so there's great theory crafting out there. There's so many videos where people have different theories. We're gonna I don't want to say talk about ours, but talk about kind of what we thought and what we think is going to happen. I really think that Square Enix, I almost said Square Enox.
I heard that. I thought it was your mic like glitching out and like elongating it.
It's so like my kiddo's been playing Breath of the Wild so much that the Henoxes, those giants, like that. Yeah, that is stuck in my mouth. Anyway, Square Enix.
Mr. Enix would like a word with you.
Yes. That I really do feel like with some of the changes, they are paying attention. They are aware to these small things. I feel like they have a vision, and I am more than happy and here to be on the ride for Square Enix's vision with this remake. But it's hard to without knowing where they're going, what the end is going to be, and to see it all, it's hard to say whether this ending will really pay off. We need that whole picture. So it's like the ending worked and I'm happy about it, but like they could also drop the ball not
100%.
And my view of the ending could change if these payoffs aren't there, so it's really hard. But initially didn't like it, learned to love it. I love the direction the remake is seeming to go. And again, even seeming to go is based off of things we want to see happen, based off of theories that we have and other people have. So it's just it's weird. It's weird to talk about the ending.
It is, and it's kind of in a dangerous situation right now on Square's end, because they've painted themselves into this corner where they're showing that, hey, we're not doing this one for one, we're doing this a whole new way. And, what comes with that decision that they chose to make, that, that wasn't really a huge outcry from the fan base when we were asking for the remake, wasn't, hey, change it or whatever. So they took it upon themselves to do this. And when they didn't even have to, they could have done that one for one and everybody would have went to bed happy, but they chose to do it this way. So they've painted themselves into this corner to where they're creating this whole new, like splintered off story of Final Fantasy VII, to where they have to get it right and they have to do it well and they have to make it a good, compelling story with lovable characters. And so far, they got the lovable characters down 100%. There's no questions there. The story is compelling, but so they got that, but they could also, like, as you said, just drop the ball and it could just fall apart after this, where their idea of whatever they had, maybe this first section of it was really good, but then where they're trying to take it from here, they could totally just, tell us a super crummy story and we could get to the end and it could just be like absolute hot garbage. And it's like, okay, well, I guess I'm literally never going to play the remake ever again because they just ruined the entire story. And like they put themselves in their own position, and I'm totally for it, because like when I play the remake, I'm playing it because I want that world and those characters. And like if I want the original story, I'm going to go play the original game. When I want something more,
or Ever Crisis when we get that.
Oh yeah, and I'm so excited. Oh, I'm so excited for Ever Crisis. I love the design of that game. But I digress. So like I play the remake because I want to experience a game with those characters in this world, and maybe it doesn't have to be the exact same story beats one for one. And I'm just hoping that in the end, when part 432 comes out, it's good. I don't want to shelve my 432 games and never touch them again.
I think so. My biggest worry, because of course Square Enix dropping the ball, such a vague term. There's so many ways to drop a ball, right? I mean, at least in this context. And
gravity.
Gravity. The thing I'm worried about is there's two things, and one is, well, I guess it's Square Enix's fault for both of them, but one of them is the story getting too convoluted. We've talked about like adding in too many villains. They've got whispers going on. They've got destiny, like all of these new layers to it. When we've talked about Final Fantasy 13, I talk about remembering the story and it being convoluted. Now, that being said, I have not played Final Fantasy since it released, and it's been a long time. And memory is what did I say?
You just said Final Fantasy.
Oh yeah, Final Fantasy 13. I have not played that one in a long time, and memory is real tricky, and you settle into your bias and stuff like that. But I remember the story being very convoluted. Now, I've gone on record saying I'm very eager to replay that game. Please re-release it, you guys, Square Enix, and so I can re-experience it because I'm stoked.
On PS5.
But I remember that story being very convoluted and hard to follow as my current state, and so I don't want them to make the story too complicated, too convoluted. That's not what I want. I hope they don't do that. That being said, the other thing I'm worried about is that it's a great idea to release the game in parts, because they're going to get to really, they're not going to rush. I mean, they'll probably still rush a little bit. Let's be honest. It's a game development studio, but they don't have to cram everything into like some super like short time frame. They will get to really envision this world with modern day graphics and the proper way. But what happens is when you release these in parts and you make the changes they're doing and you leave it on cliffhangers, is who knows how long it'll be before part 2 of Remake comes out, right? Like it could be 2023, 2024. I hope it doesn't go any longer than that. I really hope 2023 is the year. There are already, with the very well-crafted theory crafters we have and the people within this community digging into these stories and the clues and the Easter eggs and the lore and the compilation, we run into this thing to where prevailing theories come out, people subscribe to them and go, yes, this is great. This is convincing. This is what I think. I'm guilty of this. There are theories out there that I'm like, yes, this is what I think is happening. Expectations are created. Again, we've talked about expectations leading up to Remake, and now we have these whole new sets of expectations going on. If they just completely go a different trajectory and it's not, I can't believe I'm going to say, like, it's not as good or well thought out as all the other theories that people have done, it may be weird. Unless it's done super well, and even in a convincing way, like, oh, this is the direction we were going in. You didn't think of that. And then we're like, oh, okay, and it's done well enough, then that's fine. But like, if it's done poorly and we've done all of this theory crafting and stuff over here to the other side, and like we are all convinced this is what was going to happen, and it's not, and it's done in an even worse way, like that's a whole new level of expectation that they're just like, oh yeah, no, and like that could upset people too. We've had years to build a headcanon, essentially.
Dude, that would be awful. Like, the game comes out and is finished, and you're like, dude, old boy over here who has his YouTube channel with 100 subscribers had a better idea how this game ended than the way you guys did it. Oh man, I never even considered that, and that would be absolutely devastating. But
I didn't either till right now.
Oh, this is new.
Yeah,
I don't think that's what will happen. I also don't believe that any one theory is going to be 100% correct. I think there is 100%, 110% guaranteed there is going to be things in this game that not a single person considered.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think that these theories and videos and, big brained discussions going on are based off of things that have already been included in Remake and Intermission. I don't think with the care and attention to detail, and we've kind of talked about this before, that Square Enix is putting into the remake, they're not doing it with no thought. They are doing it intentionally. They've got, a very, I say obvious, and obvious is a difficult word to use here because, again, Square Enix has not come out and confirmed these things within the game, right? There's a word here, implying things through a story without outright saying it is a valid and normal storytelling mechanic that's existed for a long time. So like they may not ever come out and say some of this stuff. It may just be like you're watching the game, like you should put this together. But Square Enix is paying attention to things like color palettes, and one of the big things we talked about with Genova's the blood trail not being blood anymore but being purple and this like alien like matter. It's easy to go, okay, well, Genova's an alien, so it wouldn't be blood, it would be an alien like matter. But they also made the decision to use the color purple, and purple is what we see tied to Jenova, Sephiroth. There's the enigmatic specters. That's always that one whisper that when you fight them, it's the purple whisper. Or when you see Aerith in the alleyway in the very beginning, when she looks right at the flickering window or like lamppost down the alley, and it's like, oh, that's new. That's like really the first change you get to see. There's a tint of purple down there. It's like they're aware of these things, and whether or not this color palette ends up being true, we'll need more about the game as it comes out. But like Square Enix is doing these things on purpose. It is driving these theories, and I don't think Square Enix is doing them just for the giggles.
Balls.
They're not just doing it just because like, oh, it'd be great if we just threw this one thing in there. Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely not. I think every single little detail is foreshadowing in some way. We may not see it until 10 years after the last game's out and somebody's replaying it and that they know the whole story and they're replaying them all and they see this detail. They're like, oh my God, they told us from the first 10 minutes of the first game that this is what was going to happen. I 100% believe that all of those little things is foreshadowing in some way. Like they put a lot of attention to detail in this world, and down to like the posters that are on the walls of the train stations down, and like the
Benora apples, like that's so tight.
Right, the apples and the discussions that random NPCs are having on the side of the street as you're running through the slums, and like the things they're talking about and they're mentioning, like they've put a lot of thought into the details, and that's important because those details is what makes a video game world feel like it's real. Like you can play a game and sure, there's people there, but if they're just there doing nothing, have nothing to say, and they're not adding any value, then the world might as well just be empty. Or, like you go and there's nothing on the walls or advertisements or any of that kind of stuff. And they've gone through to make sure, like they didn't even have to do all that stuff. That's not required to make a game, but it is required to make a game good and have a world that is believable. And they could have just done half-butted. Since I'm not
if you're gonna do it full butt.
Half-butted posters or details or whatever. Like they could have just thrown something up and been like, oh, join soldier, and like that was it. But no, they went and they're like pulling lore from compilation games and advertising hair cream because everybody makes jokes about Cloud and Sephiroth's hair, and like
everyone's hair, let's be real.
Oh, that's true. And like they just put a lot of attention on the little details. So something like Aerith looking to the right and it being a purple light, that is 150,000% deliberate. I refuse to believe that is just like, oh, haha, happy accident. Oh, I'm so glad this ended up working out. No, wait, no. Especially how iconic that first scene is, where she's like staring down at like the live stream or whatever that is, the Mako or whatever that's like bubbling up in her face. That's such an iconic scene. I mean, that's the intro. I mean, everybody who's played Final Fantasy VII has at least seen the intro. So many people have seen the intro than have seen the ending. So I feel like every frame of the intro is incredibly important because it totally, first off, it pulls us veterans back into that nostalgia factor where we're just like, oh yes, this is so good. This is what I remembered with the music and the sound effects and everything. So it's, as I'm going off on this crazy long tangent, but it was totally intentional. And all of those other little things like that throughout the game are also intentional.
Yeah, because you're absolutely right with the ending, because the game opens up and you see the clouds, the bird flying, you see people in Midgar, and all of that was new, but all of that to people playing the game with a reference to Final Fantasy VII, to us, that was all very obviously like, oh, they're showing off essentially. Like they're showing off these graphics. They're showing off the area around Midgar, how dead it is. They're showing off what Midgar looks like. They're showing what residents of Midgar do. Like they're just flushing out the city in that intro cinematic going, this is what Midgar is, and seeing it in a new way. So while that was new, we all understood the intent with what we were seeing. But when you get to that, the Mako blooming up over the reactor, and then you get to that, like, it's transitioning to that starry, type sky as it kind of like zooms down into Aerith's face, and we're immediately in the parts of the intro that we are familiar with, and we're getting it frame by frame, like it is exactly beat for beat. But then you see Aerith look downright like she's scared or heard something, and that's like the first very real change. It's like, ooh, and then you get these people making these connections like, wait, freeze frame, there's a purple hint down there. Oh, when we ever see the color purple, it's Sephiroth, it's Genova, like, and they piece these things together. Again, like you said, like there's literal teams designing these things to be those colors. Like, this isn't an accident. This isn't just like it means something. I believe in Square Enix's vision. I'm on board. It's just that they need to deliver that vision from beginning to end without fumbling, making it a convoluted mess. And I hope it's not. I'm 100% here for it. This is my favorite game ever.
And one of my big worries is like, so part one set the tone and set the bar very high. You know what I'm saying? It makes me think of like those TV shows where they come in with like an incredible first season and they're immediately like, this season was so good. All right, I'm green lighting the next 3 seasons. Okay. And then they come in and season 2 just sucks. Or it's like subpar. It's like a 5 out of 10. And then, they learn a lot off that. And then they come back in seasons 3 and 4, or like back up there, and they're really good again, but it's still not as good as season 1. I have literally no factual evidence to say or suggest that this is what's going to happen with Remake, but it is a legit fear of mine that they're going to come in to part 2 thinking, we're untouchable because this game is so well liked. It did so good. We sold a lot of games. We can do whatever we want. And then they're going to get too big of a head and just create a really bad game. And then that's going to humble them. And then they're going to come back and create some good games. And that's like a big fear of mine right now.
I could see that, especially because the wait is so long, and they're tackling a different part of the story. Midgar, the city of Midgar itself is like its own character. And while places you go to later in Final Fantasy VII are great locations. Midgar is its own character in and of itself, and it's really hard to beat that setting in other places in the Final Fantasy VII story itself. But what I have seen and what does give me comfort is that they already, even with intermission, and I don't know if they listen to people within the community, because you have to look at, like, as far as a dev timeline comes like intermission released a year and a half after Remake. They were probably developing it even before Remake technically released. So, I don't know how much was them listening to us, or maybe them recognizing certain, I don't want to say failings, but just certain shortcomings within the game itself. But one of the big critiques people had within combat with Remake, just how bad the aerial combat was. And then boom, we get Yuffie a year and a half later, if that, and Yuffie, the air combat is just phenomenal. Like, Yuffie just crushes air combat. The combat with the synergy mechanic and stuff like that, we've speculated if synergy is going to be a mechanic moving forward with the game, but that made combat a completely different feel for a lot of people, and people loved it. It was just, we saw intermission improve on a lot of things already just a year and a half later, that it leaves me hopeful that they're going to continue to improve mechanically the game, combat, stuff like that. Again, that's not the same thing as narrative and like the overarching vision of story, because they've released part one. They're committed to this vision, this narrative they've got going with Whispers and Destiny, and the seeds they've laid. They've got to grow those to fruition, for the lack of a better term.
I think that's a great term.
We'll see what happens. I think in many ways we've already seen that they can improve upon Remake mechanically within the game. I don't want to say they need to improve upon it story-wise, because I don't have anything negative really to say about the story, but let's just hope that they can continue to grow the vision they had, make everything pay off, because
don't leave us with blue balls.
Yeah, don't leave us with blue balls. But like, with what we've seen already with Remake, if they deliver on these things, Final Fantasy VII Remake can be my favorite game, my favorite Final Fantasy, because I'm all here for revisiting stories that have already been done, especially when it's done by the same people who did the original. And I'm all here for making that better and improving upon it, because there's, again, 4 years ago, they had limitations when telling this story, and they don't have those same limitations now, and they can make that story bigger and better, that acknowledges and respects the entirety of the compilation, and even just not respecting the compilation, but getting a new unique twist on this with Destiny, with some of the other things we're going to talk about potentially going on with Sephiroth and Aerith in this story. What an interesting, great new thing they can do with the story. And if it pays off, hell yes.
Yeah, and I think it's important that the people who are remaking this are the people who made the original. Like, if this was like a completely some out of left field director and I'm gonna make Final Fantasy VII Remake the way I thought it should have been made when it first came out, like, I don't think we'd be getting the product we're getting now. But these people, it's like pretty much any artist, when they look back at something they created 20 plus years ago, and they're like, man, I really sucked back then. I've learned so much. I've gotten so much better in 20 years. I want to redo this piece of art and make it better because of all of the things that I have learned. And that's why I love the fact that it's this same creators, because, they probably did look back and they're like, I can do that better. And it's their own stuff. They're critiquing themselves. It's not a third party critiquing them. So I think that's super important. And I think that is only going to add to the future installments in this. Like, it just makes me have more hope than I would have if it wasn't them.
Yeah. And honestly, I think the big part of that too, like, I 100% agree with what you're saying, but if it was just Final Fantasy VII and they went back to remake it and they were doing all of these crazy new things, I might feel a little differently about it. They have an entire compilation, which again, I firmly believe that they did not plan all of these other pieces of media out when they first made Final Fantasy VII. It just blew up and they just kept adding to the story. And going back and remaking it, they get to essentially tell the story of all of those things in a seamless way for everyone. Instead of being like, to get this, you have to go play this game and this movie and read these books and this mobile title that you can't even really get, et cetera, et cetera. Like, no, they get to condense all of these and tell all of those unique stories, maybe not the same exact way, but they get to tell them in this one game that most people will have access to. I know right now it's hard for, people to get a PlayStation 5, but by the end of this game, that won't be an issue and everyone will have access to it. It'll be out on PC, stuff like that. Like, this is going to be the stamp on Final Fantasy VII, and it's going to be great.
The big old completed stamp. Let's shuffle this away in the back and look at Final Fantasy 22, because that's probably what's going to be coming out next by the time this game is done. But, so, okay, I have a question. What do you think is going on with Zach after seeing the ending of 7 Remake and the ending of Intermission? What do you think he's doing?
Okay, so we'll tackle Zach first, and there's a couple of things we want to tackle, so we're gonna try and keep everything super brief and not do tangents because we're already at like 45 minutes. Zach, here's what I think is going on with Zach. I think Zach is alive in an alternate timeline, or my verbiage is not super great here. I don't know if alternate timeline is the best, but basically I think whatever happened with the Whispers and the Singularity and the Harbinger created some rift in time, whatever, divergent thing where Zach is alive, took Cloud back to Midgar. Because one, if it were the same timeline, how is there going to be 2 Buster Swords running around? Like, that doesn't make sense. Other timeline, Zach is alive. Weird stuff is going on. I don't know what's going on with Aerith. Like when he went to the church, if Aerith was just like, oh, I stepped out to go to the grocery store, I don't feel like Square Enix would have put a bunch of people crying in a church and had like the zoom into Zach's face and been like, yeah, like Aerith, and like it being so sad, like that would have been cheap if she was like, oh, I just stepped out to the grocery store. Sorry, like what's going on, Zach? So I don't know what's going on there.
Or she's literally in her home.
I don't know if she's dead. I don't know if I don't know what is going on there, right? They intentionally cliffhung us there. But Zach dropped Cloud off. Something is going on. What that means for the future of Remake, I don't know. Maybe this timeline cannot exist because maybe something is going on with the life stream with the planet to where like essentially two timelines going on at the same time, it would cause sickness, would have damaging repercussions. So maybe at some point Zach is made aware of this, the party is aware of this, and somehow, and essentially like Zach's fate is to die. And it sucks to say that, but like maybe Zach has to sacrifice himself for that timeline. He's the one thing propelling that timeline forward, and he needs to sacrifice himself. How that will come about, whether it's helping Cloud, whether it's helping Aerith or something like that, who knows? But maybe he has to sacrifice himself to help our characters in timeline. I'm just going to call it Timeline Prime, the prime timeline that we're in with Remake, for them to continue and that timeline to end. I don't know. I really don't know. But that's kind of like my prevailing thought right now. What about you?
Okay, so during the end of 7 Remake, when we saw Zach's final stand, there was Whispers there. Okay. So presumably with the way the Whispers have been acting throughout the entire game, we have to assume the Whispers are there to make sure that everything happens as it should with Zach dying there. Now, if you are to believe that the Whispers, since they control fate, maybe even time, that they may be present throughout all aspects of time at the exact same time. So if you were to kill a Whisper in the future, it would delete it from everything in the past as well, because they are, they exist in all points in time at the exact same time. So if the party,
some Doctor Who stuff,
if the party killed the Whispers in this singularity, and let's assume the singularity is like maybe outside time and space, or maybe it's where all points of time and space meet, destroy the Whispers inside of there, and that just literally deletes them from history. So anything that they could have changed no longer is being changed. So Zach was able to win because the Whispers weren't there to stop him from killing all those Shinra soldiers. And we know Zach is an amazing soldier, so he was able to beat all those guys and survive. With that, that foundation right there, what I'm hoping happened is that it also converged all of those timelines into one. So Zach is now in the same timeline as Cloud and Company. I'm hoping he's
prime timeline, Remake timeline.
Yes, Zach is in prime timeline. Earth 1, if you will. I'm hoping like, so he shows up to that church and she's not there because, well, she left Midgar. She's off with Cloud right now. And I'm kind of hoping we see like Zach gets to Calm right as, we left 2 days before, and he's, tracking Aerith down. Who knows if he actually has the Cloud that he brought with him, or if he left Cloud with somebody like a doctor to get help. Maybe that Cloud's with Hojo. Like, I don't know. Like, who knows? There could be anything. But like, I have no factual evidence for any of this to support it. This is just more of like what I'm hoping happens based on this weird converging timeline theory that I have, that Zach's just trying to catch up. And then it ends with Zach having to die, as he should have, in order to correct some time thing.
So same basic idea of this whole like Zach has to die to correct things and save things, but essentially timelines converged, and your idea is that there are in fact two Clouds in Prime Timeline, and Zach ended up in Prime Timeline, it being like the real difference. Right, yeah. So I'm just kind of hoping he's just like 2 steps behind the party. Okay, cool. So powering past that, because we're not debating this, we're doing this like no, this is not a debate. We're doing this like speed round. All right, what do you think? Theories. What do you think is going on with Aerith? Well, I mean, obviously, because I know you love Aerith. She obviously knows more than she's told everybody. How much more? I don't know. It could just be maybe she's getting whispers in her ear from the planet of like, like they're leaving her cryptic messages that she's deciphering and figuring out on her own. Or it could be something like, she's talking to herself from the future. She's from the future. She's, like came out of this live stream. Either way, whatever it ends up being, I believe she knows more than she should at this point in time in the game. If we're, using the OG as like the reference, she knows more than she should. Now, I don't know if like that could lead to all sorts of weird things. Like, does she actually care about Cloud now? Or is she just using him to like manipulating him and using him to see what she wants to happen and she needs him to do it? Or does she recognize that she needs to set Cloud on the right path to make sure that he's the one who saves the planet and stops Sephiroth? Or is it all of those things? Is it none of those things? Either way, she knows something. I'm hoping they expand upon that in part 2. I could, depending on where part 2 ends, I could see them not expanding on it at all. Or if it goes on for a pretty long time, like the game, they're going to have to expand on it. Because I think they'll expand on it, but not necessarily answer it potentially. Yeah, like I feel like they're gonna add in a whole section of the game where maybe it's even when Cloud and Tifa fall into the live stream after Medeal, and maybe that's when they'll talk to her because she's in the live stream, and maybe that's when they'll talk to her and she'll be like, "This is actually what's going on." Because after that part in the original, Cloud comes out and he's like, "Dude, I'm a freaking awesome person. I wasn't the one that should have been chosen to do this, but that dude's dead, so I'm going to do everything I can." But like he came out with like this new sense of like inspiration, and he was like motivated and he was ready to go. So I could totally see that coming into line. Like obviously it made sense in the context of the OG, but I could see that where they also talked to Aerith in there, and now he's coming out with that motivation and all of that stuff. So I'm excited to see what happens with her. Maybe I will like her more. Please, Square Enix, help me like her more. We will see. I definitely think 100%. Aerith knows things she shouldn't. I believe that with the way the live stream and time works, and they've kind of expanded upon that, I believe that essentially the Aerith from the future, from the original timeline, sending herself knowledge back through the live stream and essentially like sharing things with her. My question is, is it Aerith or is it the planet? Because when I think about it, like, is it the planet giving her information? Why would the planet give her information, but also have the whispers going on, and the planet made the whispers? And why is the whispers trying to constantly stop her from sharing information? So I really think it's her. Like, I think Aerith is playing her own game, essentially, to like give herself information and stack the deck in her favor. We don't know what Aeriths, I'm going to say Aeriths. We don't know what they all know. So and, Aerith. We don't know what future Aerith knows, and we don't know what this current Aerith knows. Aerith and Sephiroth, and we'll get to Sephiroth in just a sec, but like Aerith and Sephiroth are playing this game of chess with destiny now and all of this stuff. Like they've been in the live stream for a long time, have been trying to stop each other since Advent Children. There was stuff going on after that with the live stream and Omega and Dirge. Who knows how long after that in the compilation that was going on. They are still fighting each other for the fate of the planet and for the live stream. We'll have to see how that pays off. It's funny because the fated foes has always been Sephiroth and Cloud, but like I really feel like this game is kind of taking this turn to where like Aerith and Sephiroth are kind of like a new level of fated foes fighting for the fate of the planet in the live stream. Aerith knows things she shouldn't. We've seen examples of it in the game. We see her constantly trying to hold her tongue and not say certain things. When you get that scene with Aerith on the bridge, when Sephiroth finally shows up at the end, Aerith's not timid, right? Like I feel like timid is better describes Tifa. Tifa's always the more reserved one and holding things quiet and, say what you will about Aerith, but Aerith is out there and outgoing and says what she's thinking, but she's never really like grumpy or angry about it. But when Sephiroth shows up on that bridge and she stops Cloud from going forward and she walks forward and she's like, and you're wrong. You're all wrong. And she's like takes that hard stance and that tone in her voice and she stops Cloud and she walks forward. Like that's powerful. Like she knows something's going on and we don't get to know what it is because she's playing a game. So yeah, I don't know what that game is, but she's trying a new way to beat Sephiroth and to cure the life stream because Sephiroth's been in there polluting it for so long. Brings me to my next question. What do you think is going on with Sephiroth?
I think Sephiroth's got the same thing going on as Aerith because he also seems to know a lot. Now, that may be for a different reason than Aerith does. That could just be because, well, he's in the live stream absorbing literally all of the knowledge of the planet. So he's just knows everything because of where he actually is. And it also may be Sephiroth manipulating Aerith. Like if all Aerith is hearing is little whispers in her ear from the live stream, that might be Sephiroth disguising who he is and he's manipulating her. I don't know. But I think Sephiroth, for the most part, is pretty much the same as usual as from the OG. I don't really think too much more is changing with him other than the fact that he is adapting to whatever Aerith is having them do. I just think the reason we're seeing him more in all of those things is because Square is making him more of a prevalent villain and they're showing him more because of his pop culture reference. And he's not that hidden Jaws anymore. We know who he is. So they're just showing him off more because, like, let's be real. There is people out there who idolize Sephiroth and they want to see him and they play Final Fantasy VII for him. And I feel like Square Enix may have thought they may have been doing a section of the fan base a disservice if they just hadn't showed him at all. Or, like you could have been felt like, well, I feel like I got gypped because Sephiroth wasn't even around and he's the main villain. So he just, I think he's just still going about it like usual. And it may have been like a limitation in the original where they don't have Sephiroth coming and talking to Cloud like he was as early as he was. Because I mean, every encounter we had in the original with Sephiroth, he still said all sorts of weird cryptic stuff. But now in the day and age we are in and the technology levels, they can expand it. They can expand upon it more. I honestly think everything we saw with Sephiroth falls right in line with his character from the original and like Advent Children and everything. Like, I don't really think he seems too much different. And like chapter 2, that was Cloud hallucinating. That's because of everything that's happened to him, but that's not like stuff. That's like, like the reunion and this Joe Novoselic calling to him and stuff. That's not like that wasn't actually Sephiroth coming down and like, I'm going to go poke fun at Cloud. That was Cloud losing his dang mind. Like the ending of this game of Remake is actually where Sephiroth decided to intervene. That wasn't just a hallucination on Cloud's end. So I just think that's totally in line with his character.
So I want to interject. I do think the building, like the fire and stuff, when we first see Sephiroth in chapter 2, I think that was Cloud's, like Genovacel's PTSD, his mental things going into play there. But I wonder if that's what was going on when we see Sephiroth with Aerith, because at that point, Cloud does not know who Aerith is. The Whispers haven't been introduced to Cloud. So for Sephiroth to show up there right as Aerith turns and Sephiroth to touch her shoulder and to essentially freeze frame and be like, you can't save anybody, and taunt Cloud, I wonder if that's a different Sephiroth because it seems too intentional. The one thing I want to add is that I completely agree. Sephiroth is manipulating events. I don't know that he's the one. I don't believe personally that he's feeding Aerith bad information via the live stream, but I do think that the entire game he has been manipulating things with the Whispers, with infecting like a Whisper or two via the live stream to manipulate events, to force his will on things, to get the Whispers involved, to get Destiny involved, and manipulate the party to fight Destiny, because every iteration we've seen of Sephiroth up until now is him losing. Sephiroth had lost in the original game. Sephiroth lost in Advent Children, and in Omega, or in Dirge of Cerberus, we see Omega destroyed. And there is literally at that point no way for Sephiroth to get off this planet with the life stream, because he is confined to the life stream. Like, he is stuck. His vision and plans are screwed. And so he is like, I need to find a way to break Destiny, because this cycle, we've talked about the circle of the planet and everything is for Sephiroth's defeat. So he's like, well, screw that, fight Destiny. I need to defeat Destiny, but I need to manipulate the party, them, to do it for me. And so he does this cascading domino effect where we have to fight Destiny and think that we need to be fighting Destiny because it's trying to kill us. And we fight Destiny, we free Sephiroth. The one part that I don't understand is that Aerith seemed at that ending where we go into the singularity and stuff like that. She knows we are about to stop Destiny. She has that line where it's like, if we go in there and we do this, we won't be the same people. I'm not quoting it verbatim, but she knows that there are consequences to what we are about to do. So maybe it was just so bad at that point that we can't go back. Like the dominoes have fallen. We can't pick them back up. We can't put the Whispers away. There's no getting off that bridge. There's no getting off this train we've started with Remake. Yeah, like we can't close it. So like maybe she's like, well, crap, we have to go in there now, and we have to hope that this new Destiny we're forging is still going to be, we're going to be strong enough to defeat Sephiroth in it. But we go in there and the chains are off. Sephiroth is out now, and he's like, cool. And whether that means he's going to be like, okay, I am free of Destiny, so tight. I'm going to go get the black materia and do this whole plan I was going to do to begin with from the original. Like, that was a great plan. Or maybe he's got a new plan with some subtle differences. Like we said, the devs did say the game will continue largely as we expected it to. So maybe there'll be a little flourishes. Maybe that is Sephiroth's plan. But point is, Sephiroth is now free of Destiny, where he is doomed to be defeated over and over. And what his plan moving forward now is after that, who knows? Aerith has got a lot of faith in us. It seems to be able to defeat him. But aside from that, we could speculate like certain things, like, is Genesis going to come back? Are we going to see Minerva? Are we going to see these other things from Crisis Core? Is Vincent going to play a bigger thing? But that's all way too soon, because we haven't even seen like truly tangible things. Like there's real light breadcrumbs that people have speculated, but we haven't seen that yet, at least for you and I to be like, yes, this is going to happen.
I think we got some exciting things to come. I think they've really set this game up where it's going to be something magical, and it's going to surprise us, and we are mostly overall going to love it. Obviously, you can't make everybody happy, but I'm really happy with where things are going and the way things are looking, especially with intermission. The ending still, for me, is neutral. It like we've been saying this whole episode, if they follow up with it into something incredible, then obviously the ending was really good and it worked. But if they take this idea that they have and they turn it into doo-doo, I'm just going to be disappointed and shelve all my copies, and they'll collect dust. But either way, right now, I am very excited to see where this goes. And I'm hoping for a 2022, late 22 to early 23 release for part 2. That's my guess on part 2's release.
Fingers crossed. I do not want to wait too long. They've got 16 going on. It's a different team, but there's marketing strategies and fiscal planning and all of these things that go into these decisions for game releases. But I hope we don't have to wait much longer than 2023. But
I hope not. I hope early 23 at the latest.
Yeah, I hope so. But that being said, is there anything you want to add in about the ending or remake in general, before we kind of close this episode out?
Yeah, I do. If any of you guys want to argue with me about this on the internet, because that's what I love to do, come join our Discord server. Ping me in it. I'm Feyerbrand in there. We can argue until my fingers are blue from typing angrily. I'm just kidding, you guys. We can have very nice civil discussions. I'm a very open-minded person. I can change. I am not a stubborn guy at all. You come change my mind if you disagree with anything. Okay? Please feel free to come in there and chat with either of us and all of the other people that are in there. They all love Seven.
We have a great little community at this point. I'm very happy with it. So that being said, just a couple of final housekeeping things since you've stuck around this far. We're done with our, trilogy episode about Remake. What we've got coming down the pipe is we are going to be, we can finally drop some names, but we have an interview coming up with the artist and all around swell guy known on Twitter as Nater5. We just refer to him as Nater. He was kind enough to provide the artwork for our podcast and the website when we get that up and running. He was not a big.
He didn't just provide it.
Yeah, we paid him. We commissioned him, but he's still a great guy.
We gave him money. He's awesome. We love him.
He does not like Remake. And so we are going to be bringing him on and discussing what he didn't like about it. He's going to kind of be the nominated voice of the camp of people who weren't really a fan of Remake. And we're going to talk about why. It's not going to be a debate. I love Remake. Fair's a little bit more lukewarm about it, but we're not going to fight him. We're going to talk about what he didn't like and why and have that voice be heard. We're going to kind of get him to talk about what he did like. And then we're going to be interviewing Kutakuma, who is a close part of the Cosmo Canyon Observatory. And he does a great many things there with that team. And he loves Remake. And we're going to talk to him about what he does love about Remake and why it was so great for him. And he's going to kind of, again, be that impromptu voice about the side that loves it. And then we also have an interview coming up. And interview is a strong word. It's mostly going to be us hanging out and talking about Final Fantasy VII. But we're going to be talking with it's going to be a bro down. With the First Encounter podcast, we are going to be having Chris and Haney on. We are going to ask Haney questions about Final Fantasy VII and his experience with it. We are going to try real hard to discussing anything spoilery because he is on media blackout over anything not pertaining specifically to the original Final Fantasy VII game and the first little bits of Crisis Core that he's played. And then we're going to be talking with Chris as well about, Final Fantasy VII is his favorite game. We're going to get his take on some of these things. I don't know which episode is going to come out first with everything going on. It'll be a surprise. But that's the next 3 episodes we've got coming down the pipe. And that will pretty much finish up our talk of Final Fantasy VII for a little while.
Yeah, until we get part 2. Then you can expect it to ramp back up.
Yeah, or if we ever feel like going back to revisit our Cloud R Sick episode and do a part 2 where we talk about the other characters. But for now, yeah, we'll see. We don't plan anything. But for now, if you want to come talk with us on social media, as Fayer mentioned, we've got the Discord. Fayer's got his YouTube channel where he streams and does pretty much all Final Fantasy content. Come talk with us on Twitter at Magus Brothers. And if you are enjoying this podcast, please leave us a review, subscribe, share. These things matter. They help that algorithm and help us get in touch with more viewers and listeners. Aside from that, I hope you all have a great week.
Have a great week, everybody. Bye.
Bye.